Hey everyone, good morning. It's Rita from Miss Rita to the Rescue. My dogs are particularly barky today. Apologize, they just love to say hello. Don't you guys? Yeah. So I'm going to wait until I get a few friends on, but I wanted to tell you that today we're going to talk all about text boxes, and with that includes a conversation about fonts and also a conversation about how to choose a font, a font in the text boxes, and how to manipulate those fonts in Cricut Design Space. This is not a difficult thing, but it does take a bit to wrap your head around how to do text boxes. And text boxes are not just for writing, although I use them a lot for writing. But good morning, Penny. I am. Thank you for sharing. Thanks. So text boxes can be used for a lot of things, including, cutting out vinyl or making like tags and things like that. I've used them to cut out vinyl for like the side of my binders. I've also used text boxes to create my own stickers for the back of my car. Good morning, Mishka. And of course, using them inside of cards. Lisa, Christine, welcome. Good morning. So it's really important for you to understand how text boxes work and how you can manipulate them, and the extent to which you can manipulate them. I don't think people know. Hi, Emmy. Hi, Laverne. How are you? Good morning. So I don't know the extent to which people understand how manipulatable text boxes are, but I want to show you the extent as much as I can. Text boxes are one of those things where it's really kind of personal because it's not a pre-designed image, and I want to start with that idea. A lot of times when I do projects, people say, "What's that font? I want to replicate it. What's that font?" And a lot of times I'm taking images and that are already pre-made. So I want you to understand the difference there, okay? Is that when you go to images and you find something, let's just go and we'll just type in phrases. When you find an image like this, trick or treat, this is an image. It is made up of words that are done in a font, but when you're pulling these things from Design Space, you don't have the opportunity to manipulate them so much. Like, so, maybe I'm trying to think, you want to do something made in the shade and you want to, manipulate it in some way, or trying to think of a good example, but there are all these, they're images, okay? So you can't really change out the text. Like if you wanted to make more than one mermaid and make it little mermaids or something, you can't really, because it's an image, okay? And so oftentimes people ask me, what is this font? And I really don't know because it's an image. But people want to replicate fonts all the time or replicate images using fonts all the time. So they ask, what's the font? Now, okay, a font is just a fancy word for a way of the letters to be typed. Font actually didn't come into use in the general vernacular until a few years ago, but I remember having worked with some typesetters, we always talked fonts, and they really were just like these fonts that were built in to our computers, but there were like literally hundreds of fonts out there, and they would get their names based on the owner of the font. And then this whole thing happened and, sort of exploded the whole idea of font. You can, there are some fonts that are just built straight into Design Space, and there are also some fonts that are built into your computer system. And there's a lot of them, especially if you have Cricut access, okay? And let me just show you what I mean. I'm going to type my sister's name here, Teresa. Okay, so if I want to look at all of the fonts that are available to me in Design Space, and I have Cricut access, it's almost an overwhelming amount of fonts available to you. But still, you know, even though there are all of these available, and I'm going to just keep scrolling, sometimes people want to add fonts that they find somewhere else or that they purchase somewhere else. And so I'm going to show you real quick how to do that and where you can go to do that. But it really is dependent on your computer and not Cricut Design Space. So let me this is still all the fonts, and I generally don't install fonts outside of what is given to me. I think there's literally hundreds of them here to choose from, and it can get a little overwhelming, you know. So first let's go outside of Design Space and let me just show you. This is one of a couple of sites. It's called Dafont, DAFONT.com. This Dafont has all free, I believe they're all free, downloadable fonts, okay? So if you happen to be here, and there's all kinds of different categories, like if you wanted a typewriter font, here they are, and then there's a stencil font area. So here are a bunch of stencil fonts, and they just have all different categories. They have script ones. So if you're interested in script, this one is a very popular type. So you see they all vary slightly, and so you would then choose, okay, I really like this one here. Let's call this one here the Blacklist. You would go over to the right here, and you would download it. And you'd get a dialog box from your computer saying, you know, do you want to allow the download? It would come and download into your computer, and you would go to your downloads file and find it. So usually, let's see, okay, so it's listed by the name. So this one was called the Blacklist. And if you were to open it up, you would see that there are two files here. One is a .txt file, and that is just the license information. So for instance, if you're going to use this commercially, you need to follow whatever the owner of the font, they're giving you permission to use it, but they may have some restrictions on it if you're going to use it commercially. And then you get what is called a TTF file. Sometimes they're OTF files, but so a TTF is just it stands for True Type Font. Okay, and once you locate that file and you click on it, and this is on a Mac, but it's very similar, I hear, on other files, okay, on other computers. So it brings up this little box that says, okay, here is the font that you want to add. And you have to click on this here, Install Font. And then it will go through the process of installing the font. And if there's any problems, like just now, there was a little problem, it will tell you so. Now, under here, these are all of my system fonts. So if I go through these, you can see all of my system fonts. And I don't have a lot, but there are some people that, you know, that they do this. They have a lot of them. They're very specific about their text. I'm feeling good. Oh, you asking Teresa? Yeah, I feel good. I feel good today. Yeah, happy, thankful. So here is where you would add these fonts, and then when you get to Cricut Design Space, you're able to use them. Okay, so you're not really uploading it into Design Space. I want to make that really clear. So, so if I wanted to say use, which I know one of the ones that I installed was called Coffee Beans. Let me see if I can find it. Coffee, because of course I love coffee. Oh, I can also search it. That's right. Here it is. So if I wanted to choose that, it would change it to that font. You see? So that's Coffee Beans font for my sister's name. Okay, so that's installing fonts, okay, to your computer, which then can be used in Cricut Design Space. But as I said, there are already dozens and dozens and dozens of fonts in your design space, built into your design space, as well as your own system fonts, this is where, if you were to download. So when you are starting off with a text box, and let's just start off, I'm going to move these little guys here so that you can kind of see. So let's say you say, okay, I want to do a big sign that says, welcome home, or something like that. You would start with a plain, canvas, and then you would go over here to where it's a big T and it says text, okay? And you would click on that T, and it's actually at the bottom. I don't even know if I can move it, but at the bottom you get like a little dialog box. So I'm not picking a font just yet. I'm just going to type welcome home. Okay. Now when I'm doing that, you'll notice on the screen up pops this. This is my actual text that I'm going to be working with. Okay. But if I wanted to, for instance, change it to welcome home Dan, I can just click on it and up comes that dialog box again. Okay. And this is like a basic text box. Now, what can you do with this basic text box? Oh, so many things. The first of which is you can change the font. Okay, so all of the choices for changing anything with text are right up here under the main toolbar. So there's under here, you'll see fonts, the style, the font size, letter spacing, line spacing, alignment, curve, and advanced. Okay, so this is where we're working with today. So I have this design in mind that I want to do a welcome home Dan, and I might want to fiddle with the fonts. That's the first thing that you can do. Happy Canada Day, Bren. Yes, Happy Canada Day. And so the first thing that you might want to do is say, well, maybe I don't like this font. I want it in a different font. So make sure your box is selected, and then you're going to go up here to font and pull the down arrow box. And what you'll see is what I was just showing you, all of these fonts, okay? And you could scroll and you could scroll, and here's what you could do is you could click on one and it comes back to your screen. And this looks a little bit more like what I had in mind. But so here, this is just me going in and changing the font type. So you can try on as many fonts as you want. And just, this is the basics, there's a lot more that you could do, but this is the basics. Okay. So that is going to font. Next up is style. So, you can choose a style. There's regular, bold, italic, and usually like bold and italic. And sometimes there's writing style. Okay. And writing style is what we'd use for the pens. In this particular font, though, I'm being told that I have only the regular, bold, italic, or bold italic. So let's have a look. Right now it's in regular. Let's have a look at what it looks like in bold. Well, maybe it's already in bold. Italic. Didn't change it. Bold and italic. So apparently, even though I get the choices, it doesn't change those. That's interesting. Oh, right, because it's Arial black that we're choosing. So let's try a different one. I have to try something not Arial. Okay, here, let's try one that I know. How about this one? Okay, let's see if this will change for me. Oh, unable to change font. They were unable to change fonts. So, okay, well, either it's because of my internet connection or something having to do with that font. But know that this is here, that you can have a different style of the same font, but in bolder or in italic, and also in bold italic, and then sometimes in writing, okay? Maybe I could choose one that's a writing font. Okay, so if you're trying to decide which font that you want to put your Welcome Home Dan in, up here on the top of this, first of all, you can search fonts. So if you know the name of the font, you can type it in and it will help you find it. It's a lot easier than having to scroll through them all. You can also just look at, right now I'm looking at all my fonts, but I might want to just look at my system fonts, or I can also look at my Cricut fonts. So this way it changes the selection. These are the ones that are automatically installed or that have been installed by me on my computer, okay? And then these are the Cricut fonts, all these fonts that Cricut provides for us in Cricut Access. You can also filter. So here, over here, there's a little box that says filter. And what it will tell you there is you can filter your fonts to being all of just your fonts. So ones that you put on there. There's also a way that you can look for multi-layer fonts, single layer fonts, writing fonts, and then also offline, because we haven't talked about offline yet, but you can use Cricut Design Space offline. A lot of people who don't have a good internet connection use that. So let's just look at one of these, which is writing, because, you know, I love to work with the pen. So using writing will then narrow down the focus of the fonts that I would like to use. So here is one, Bicycle for Two, and if I switch it to a writing, this is a writing font, okay? Now, a lot of people, and I want to just point this out, is a lot of people, they pick a font, and they don't say, you know, it's going to be writing, and they cut it, they use writing to to write it out. But what happens is the inside of the letters. So here, this is Teresa. And so the inside, this, if we change this to cut, I'm sorry, from cut to draw, which I can do right up here. Cut to draw. You'll notice that the font sort of, it's no longer filled in. When you draw this, it is not going to fill in the letters, okay? That's really important. A lot of people think, well, I want it to fill in the letters. There are only a couple of fonts that do that, and I know one of them is called Carly, Carley, Sketch, this one here. So if you wanted to do this, see that? It's going to actually draw inside of the letters. All the other ones, though, are not going to be drawn inside of the letters. It's important to know. A lot of people get sort of hung up on that. So this is writing, okay? And then you can change it back to cut file if you want to as well. Okay, so this is a writing file, but we don't want a writing file. We want to go back to something else. Let's see, what's some of my favorite fonts? Well, there's a Cricut standard font that comes up. It's called Cricut Sans, and I got to change this back to a regular font. Here we go. Okay, so Welcome Home Dan. This is, I think, the one that you get whenever you start with a text box. Okay, and so let's talk about this part here, what we can change about this. So this is a cut file of a text box that I created, Welcome Home, Dan. So you can change things like the size of the font. You can also change the spacing between the letters. If you had more than one line, you could change the spacing of the lines above it, okay? So for instance, let's make this stacked. We'll say, welcome home. And then we do this. Dan. Okay? So now we have this, and they're stacked, right? But let's say you want to center them, or you can also, justify. It's called justification, and that's under alignment. So if you wanted to center align them, you would choose right here under alignment, you would choose center. But you could also right justify, which means it would go to the right, or you could left justify, which means it all stacks to the left. Okay, am I boring everyone, or are you guys listening and learning? Let me know, okay, because I want to know how deep you want to get into this. So for instance, I always center justify my my writing text with pen. So I always choose the center because I think it looks nice like that. But if you're going to cut this out in, say, vinyl, you may not need or want it to be justified. So you can always keep it to the left, okay? The idea of, okay, good, Brian. The idea that we've stacked this like this makes this actually a lot easier to work with, because when you want to change the spacing between these letters, it won't take into account that there are two words on either side. Like it won't, if it were not left justified and stacked, I just got rid of it. Let me do that again. Welcome home, Dan. Okay, so here's welcome home again. Okay, so there's welcome home, Dan. Whoops, that could happen. So if I wanted to stack them, I would just click on the text that created. Up pops that text box, okay? And I'm going to go in here, and before the H, I'm going to hit carriage return or return, right? And then before the D, I'm going to hit return. So now I have 3 lines of my text, okay? If you wanted to, you could make each of these lines their own size, their own color, their own whatever you want to do. If you want to make Dan a different font even, you can do that. And that's in the advanced section, okay? That's right here. See this? Advanced. If you click on advanced, you have 2 options. Ungroup 2 letters and ungroup 2 lines. By ungrouping 2 lines, you would then make welcome and then home and then Dan. They'd be having their own text box, okay? So let me show you that. So we're going to ungroup 2 lines. Now welcome is free from home, is free from Dan. So you can then decide, okay, I want this to be in a different font or a different size. Maybe I want Dan in italics or anything like that. That's called ungrouping 2 lines, which now that we've done it doesn't give us that option. Ungroup 2 letters is different. Ungroup 2 letters is taking this particular one. Let's move this out of the way. And we want to be able to move the C and the O and the M and the E independently. Sorry. Yes, Bren, you can center. You can center. It's under alignment here. So you got left, center, right. Okay. But here in an advanced stage, let's say you have this font and you're like, I think there's too much space between the W and the E. And I want to be able to move the W over. Or maybe there's just a tiny hair of a space that you don't like between that C and the O. Well, the only way to move those is to do ungroup by letter, okay? And that's here under Advanced. Choose ungroup by letter. And then I can say, take this W and move it over. This is a technique that you might use a lot if you work a lot with texts, because oftentimes the way that they come out is not exactly the way that you want it to look. And, you know, it's important to be able to have that kind of flexibility. However, I will tell you that once you're done making that move, you do need to group it and make sure that you weld it this way, because otherwise if you were to cut it out, it would come out, you know, maybe the O would come first and then the L and M, it would not come out in that order, okay? So once you have ungrouped it to letters and major changes, it actually, it's a cut file, individual cut file for each of the letters. So you do need to sort of grab a box around it and go down to the bottom. How do you keep them in a straight line? Okay, that's a great question. So someone asked, Kristen's asked, when correcting the spacing between letters, how can you keep them in a straight line? For me, the way that I always do it, let's do it to this one, home. I use the guidelines on the bottom here, this guideline, and I make sure that my original is actually on there. So my H, my O, M, E, and the comma are all lined up with this sort of guideline. So then when you go to ungroup two letters, when you move them, you have to maintain the same linear thing. So I'm moving the O, but I'm not moving it up like this, okay? I am actually just kind of shifting it over to correct that spacing. So that's a good question. So I always line it up along one of the lines on my canvas so that I know that's where it needs to go. And you might have to do some real close-up work there. If you can't, you know, it can go a little close up so you can see, okay, I want it to be lined up right on that line. You can probably align to bottom. Align to bottom. I've never used that. I've never used that. Perhaps you can. I don't know. I don't know where that option would be, Dorothy. Align to bottom. This is how I line them up. And granted, you know, this is how I do it. So if you guys have better ideas, then let's hear them, because everybody, okay, I grouped it. But if you group it, then it's going to be grouped all the way. And what she was asking was, you know, how do you group it? Yeah, the puppy's playing with this ball this morning. How do you group it so that you can move all those letters to be on the same line there? Align to bottom. But where is my align? I don't see align to bottom. I don't see it. You'll have to show us, Dorothy, what you mean to align to bottom. Okay. So that is how I make sure when I'm correcting the space is I go to advanced, I ungroup by letters, I move them individually, and I align it along this line. That's how I do it. But Dorothy sounds like she has another way of doing it. So if we can figure out how to do it, then I'm all ears. So let me know. Let's also talk about these other options that we have under the font. Okay, we've got letter spacing. So if you didn't want to ungroup two individual letters, you can try to use this feature, letter space, and you can go up and down, and you'll notice I'm working on this one. Let's see. I'm working on Dan here, and I'm touching this letter spacing, and it's like a number, and you can use a little up and down arrows so you can see what I mean. I'm making the space between the letters smaller. Sometimes that works too, and then you don't have to ungroup two letters. If you have something that's more than one line, you can also make the space between this and the second line larger or smaller. That's under line spacing. Let me show you another one. So here's welcome. Now, actually, I'm going to put another text box in because, all right, so, by the way, once you ungroup two letters or two lines, then it doesn't have the same features for font. Like you can't use this feature if you've already ungrouped two letters. Okay, so this feature is called curve text. A lot of people like to do curve text, and basically it's sort of a way to curve the text either up like a smile or down like a frown. And you'll notice when it comes in, when you touch on it, there's a dot and it's in the middle of the line. So you can move the dot to the left and it makes like a rounded smile all the way up to here. So you can do a little or a lot, or you can make it do the frowny thing by doing this. This is fun, but I have a little bit of a hard time with this because of the way the letters are spaced. And if you go ahead and change the letters before you do this, you would end up not being able to use the curve feature, if that makes any sense. So a lot of times what people do is that they add a shape. Shapes are over here. And you choose a circle. Okay, so here's a circle. Now, if I wanted my letters to look like this around my circle, I'm going to put these back, okay? There. Okay. So I choose a circle, and then I take my letters, and I go to advanced and ungroup two letters. Then I'm able to take these letters, each of the letters, and turn them and have them sort of sit on the, don't worry about the circle being there because we'll remove it when we're done, but you can like have them perfectly move. So we can move this E and be it exactly where you want it, you see? And here's the L, so I want to move it. And you're using this roundy thing. It's like a circly thing. So I want to move it so that my letter is touching the circle, okay? And I do slant it a little bit so that it will come off that way. So let's finish this up so you can see what it looks like. And this is one of those things you gotta play with it. And E. So then when you're done, like this. Now, granted, I mean, I could do this better, but this is just to show you that this can be done. Then you take away the circle and you have your slanted. Okay? But make sure if you're going to use this technique with the circle, make sure that when you're done, after they're placed the way that you want them, you delete the circle, but then choose all the letters and weld them together, because if you don't, when you go to cut them, it won't recognize that that's the position that you want it to be in. Okay, so I'm going to weld it. and now it moves, instead of by the letter, it moves as a whole, and it's one cut thing, okay? So that is how I do curved letters, because I don't really like that curve that's in there, because I don't like the way the spacing is done. Let's see, what else is there to show you about this? Okay, let's start off with a new text box. And I'm going to show you lines. Now is the time for all good men to come. Okay. All right, so here's 3 lines together, right? Well, grouping is just the welding is like how do I explain the difference between welding and grouping? Welding is like really, like, think of it like the word is weld, like it's going to permanently keep it in that position. Grouping is just like, say you have a file that has several different pieces and you just want to group it together as a group. Like, for instance, I was uploading the carousel file for Saturday night, and there are like 30 plus pieces to it, so I grouped it into 3 areas. So if I just want to work on, say, the cupcake wrappers, I would go to that group. It wouldn't cut all together. Maybe that's a better explanation. Okay. All right, so let's say we have something that is like a bunch of lines, and here we do, right? Now it's the time for all good men to come to the aid of their party. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that's what we used to practice when we were typing, okay? So here is my box. Now, if I want to melding, like melting, yes. It's like securing them together. Like, think of a welder, you know, they're welding something. It's pretty much going to stay that way, okay? Okay, so now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their party. I should probably have finished that, right? Could you come to the aid? Okay, so now we have these 3 lines. Now, what can we do with these 3 lines? We can separate these by line. We can then separate from line to by letter. We can make some of them one font and some of them the other when we separate by line. Or we can change the font altogether by choosing a totally different font. So let's just choose a totally different font just so you can see. So in this case, I chose for the entire thing this is a writing font, okay? Regular writing font called Basecamp, right? So when I make the change, it's going to make the change for the entire thing, all 3 lines, okay? But if I wanted to, let me go back to something that's a little smaller for the screen. Cricut, let's go back to Cricut. Okay. And I don't want it on writing. I want it on regular. Okay. So now let's separate these lines. We're going to go here again to advanced, pull that down, and you will see you have the option to ungroup to lines. Now, these are all independent. Each line is independent. Okay, so I can then go and change the font or the color of the font. You can go up here and choose a different color. So if I wanted to, for instance, have these separated by color, you could do that. And I'm doing that up here where there's this little black box, okay? And I change the color. But maybe I want to change the font itself. So I do that up here again under font, and I would choose the scroll down window. And let's say I want to just search my fonts. So I filtered this to just be my fonts. And then I changed my mind. I don't want to filter it just to my fonts. I want to just use system fonts, because let's say I uploaded a particular font. Didn't we just upload a particular font? I don't know what the name of it was now. But let me see if I can find. Okay, here's one that is definitely not a Cricut font. Okay. Now, this one is called Charcuterie Block, but it doesn't look like I want it to look, right? Because it's all like smushed into one word, and I don't want it to look like that. So if I wanted to use this font, I would then have to change this to ungroup by letters, which is what we were doing before. And we'd have to start the process of moving the letters so that they would start to look like they were words. So something like this. Moving these letters, so then all of a sudden the spacing, it makes sense now, you know, the spacing makes sense. Again, this is something you have to play with, but it's available to you. So now you can see, okay, maybe I want to move this over a little tiny bit. And now that big block, it becomes the actual words instead of being this big block of letters. So that's how you change it from one font to the other. And then also how you change color, you can do that. Or you can separate the letters so that they make sense. So if you're doing a text box, the point being that there are a lot of options for you to change things to look the way that you have in your head. And there are all of these tools. They're up here under the main toolbar, they're down here, okay? So you've got change the font, you can change the style, you can change the size of the font, you can change the letter spacing, the line spacing, the alignment, you can make it curved or not, and then you can change it into its own letters or lines for that matter. So these are all tools for you. So when you're cutting something out or you have something in your head, like it doesn't look the way that I want it to, this is a way for you to make it look exactly the way that you want it to. Okay. So that's just sort of a beginner's primer on fonts. This is really important right now for people who cut a lot of vinyl. And they want to make like signs and things, but keep in mind that sometimes the work is done for you. Sometimes you just need to find the image that looks like what you want it to be. And remember, there's a difference between an image and text. And so these are images. Okay. So, you don't have to always reinvent the wheel. Like if you want, for instance, something that is a sign that says good night, you don't have to start with the text box. Look here first. Oh, you might like the way that this good night looks. And you could probably use pieces of these images by, like for this one, always kiss me good night. You can choose that and bring it into I'm going to move these. All right, here. So you might say, I love the way this good night looks, but I don't want always kiss me good night because it's for my son or something like that, So the way that you can manipulate the image is through contour, which is kind of another subject, but I will show you this just so that you can understand the difference between a text box and an image box, okay? So contour is down here, the last thing on the bottom right, and you click on there, and it shows up the entire image here. And if you just want good night, or maybe you just want kiss me, you would then do it this way. So let's do good night. I'm going to hide all the contours, and it only leaves one contour. That's this one, which is okay because that's what we want. And then I would actually click on all of these pieces that I want to show up. And so now Always Kiss Me is gone and Good Night is left. Let me show you that. See? But the loop's in there. Add words. You can also do this, Kristen. Kristen's saying, I wish I could add the image that was already in Design Space and then add words to the design. You absolutely could do that. You can do that. I can show you how to do that. Let me just go back and make sure that these... Oh, I'm over here on the right-hand side. And basically what I need to make sure is that this little thing shows up, and I forget, right here, and the eye we want to show up. Okay, so here it is. There's Good Night, and you didn't have to use a text box to do that. Kristen's asking about, could you take an image and then make changes to the image? You absolutely can do that. And you would go to, I'm going to show you example that I did for, I'm going to look up Earth, because this is a perfect example. Where is the image that I used? I had this great image, and it was really cool. Let me see if I can find it. But it had it had a banner, and I didn't want the banner. I wanted it to say Green Peabody, which is a group that I'm on here in my town. So so the image was of the Earth. Oh, darn it. Wish I could find it. Earth Day. Maybe I have to put Earth Day. It was the coolest image. All Father's Day comes up, of course. Darn it. I wish I could change. I wish I could show you how to change that. Let me see if I can find something similar to it. I suppose I could try to use this one. So in this case, I have this really happy little Earth, and with the face, and it says Happy Earth Day. But maybe I don't want the Happy Earth Day on there. Maybe I just want this around there. And to do that, let's see, we would probably just... Oh, it even has an offset feature. Okay, so we could, first of all, we could eliminate this and create our own, or you can ungroup this entire image and move all these pieces. So there's there's 3 pieces on this image, right? Like this. And then you can use a contour feature, or you could actually use like a cutting feature that would cut these letters off, but keep the circle, or you could just put in a circle that would measure that space, right? And replace that circle if you wanted to say love Mother Earth or something like that. That's where you would put in a text box and do that curved thing that I did before, which was, I'm going to add a text box, and it says, love your mother, okay? Meaning Mother Earth. So I would take this box, this text box, move these things out of the way. This is really advanced. And let's say I want to make it really like the size of these letters. Yeah. And then I would then take and make this separated by letters. Then I'd take my L and I'd move it over just like we did before. And then once I have all my letters touching the O in the way that I want it to be, right? I'll just do love so you can see this. And they do need to be touching that O, okay? My V needs to move a little bit. All right, so here's my L. I want to move that ever so slightly. Okay, so now I've got love, and I would do your mother over here. But then once you place them where you want to, then you would select them all, okay? And you can do attach or you can do weld. It's really same thing, same difference. Oh, wait, sorry. Detach. By welding, the difference is that it's going to take away the lines between the letters and the circle versus attach. So there is my, instead of Happy Earth Day, I can then put this image together, arrange to the front. So I think that the possibilities, range forward, range. All right, so the possibilities are pretty endless when you start working with these fonts and stuff, okay? And we can get into, and always, as always, I need your feedback, because is this too much or too little? Do you have very specific questions? I want to hear it so that I can help you achieve what you need to achieve in Design Space. So I think that that's enough for today, and I hope I didn't overwhelm you, but that is the working with text boxes and fonts in Cricut Design Space. And we'll see you all tomorrow. I think we're going to be doing our explosion boxes that we discussed the other day. We're going to be doing explosion boxes. And oh, before I leave, I wanted to thank my friend Dawn Walsh, whose grandchildren made me this awesome card and sent it to me. It's from Dawn Walsh, my Canadian follower, she says, and my grandchildren made this, so they decorated it. And this is what it's all about, folks, is reaching out to people and letting them express themselves, and which is I love. So we'll see you again tomorrow. We'll be doing explosion boxes, okay? And I know that Dawn's not my only Canadian, my only Canadian follower. Yeah. Oh, she did. Oh, nice. Nice card. Thank you so much, Dawn. All right, everyone. You have a great day, and we'll see you again tomorrow.